Okay, so this theory is completely bonkers and I'm not really convinced that it works, but hear me out. So I was rewatching the memories from Tears of the Kingdom, like you do, and I noticed that in this one of them, we have a very similar view of the Great Plateau as at the beginning of Breath of the Wild. So I decided to compare them side by side, and as you can see, they're pretty similar. All the geographical features are the same, there's more forests in the Dragon Tier view, and none of the current day structures are in that one either, but otherwise it's very similar. But I was thinking, there's no Hyrule Castle in the past. So how did the sealing chamber just happen to be below modern Hyrule Castle? Was that just a lucky coincidence that they were built in the exact same place? And then I was looking at this cliff and thought, is that erosion? Why is the rock more worn down in the past? Shouldn't erosion work the other way around? Maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there, but I don't think so. Then I saw that there was a Zonai castle in several memories, where Ganondorf swears fealty and later betrays the kingdom. But no ruins of this castle can be found in Tears of the Kingdom's overworld. In fact, outside of the Sky Islands, there's very few Zonai ruins to be found on the surface. The largest holdovers from the time of the Zonai are the Typhlo ruins, which doesn't appear to be the ruins of a castle, and the construct factories in the depths. So what happened to these Zonai locations to wipe them completely off the map? This all made me wonder, what if Zelda didn't go into the past? What if she actually went to the future? And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, and that's because it is, but hear me out, I've got some points. First of all, this would explain the erosion and conveniently clear up why there's underground networks in the spot where Hyrule Castle is at the current date. Because if Zelda went to the future, the underground construction of the current Hyrule Castle would still be there, even if the castle itself had long fell into ruin. And it's entirely reasonable that Ganondorf would have used these caverns as his lair in that era. So the fact that the cavern where he's sealed by Rauru exists directly under Hyrule Castle makes sense. It also explains why there's no knowledge of the secret stones in the world outside of the ruins under Hyrule Castle. Apart from the ruins under the castle, there's no mention of the secret stones anywhere else in the old architecture prior to Tears of the Kingdom. It's not that they were somehow forgotten over the ages, they simply didn't exist yet. As for the whole problem of Rauru and Sonia thinking they're the founders of Hyrule, that's surprisingly simple enough. Somewhere in the future, the Kingdom of Hyrule must have dissolved, either from revolts or outside threats, and later the Zonai descended from the heavens and built a kingdom. The kingdom's populace was mostly made up of Hylians, so they would call the kingdom Hyrule. This might sound far-fetched, but it wouldn't be the first time that Hyrule had to be refounded. It's happened before between Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks in the Adult Link timeline. Rauru and Sonia thought that they were the first founders of Hyrule, so of course they and Zelda would reasonably come to the false conclusion that Zelda went backward in time. This also rather conveniently explains why there's a new Temple of Time built. If Zelda had gone backward in time, the Tears of the Kingdom flashbacks would most likely take place somewhere in early Hyrulean history. Given that the world isn't covered in rampaging demons in these flashbacks, at least not most of the time, the flashbacks most likely take place after Skyward Sword, but probably no later than Ocarina of Time. And we see that in Ocarina of Time, there is already a different Temple of Light. So why would there be two built in the same time frame, and why would there be no mention of other temples in the canonically early games? But if Zelda went into the future, this makes sense. The Temple of Time found in current Tears of the Kingdom is already in ruins and would only further collapse if the Kingdom of Hyrule had fallen at some point in the future. Once the kingdom was refounded, it would make sense that a new Temple of Time would be built. The most obvious problem with this theory is that all the Zonai stuff like the Sky Islands are present in Tears of the Kingdom, as is Ganondorf and Zelda in the form of the Light Dragon, which I'm saying is all in the future. If Zelda went into the future, then that stuff shouldn't be back here in the current era. Or should it? This looks and sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Now, this is just a theory, but it seems to me that in transforming into the Light Dragon, Zelda triggers the Triforce's power. The similarities here are really close, so I think that's what's going on. This idea is further enforced by the fact that in her draconic slumber, the attentive viewer will notice the Triforce is visible on Zelda's hand as she restores the Master Sword. In any other Zelda game, this placement of the Triforce symbol on the back of one's hand indicates that a person is wielding one or more pieces of the Triforce. Unless you've only ever played Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you are already aware of the fact that the Triforce is basically all-powerful, and responds to anyone with a balance of the three virtues of power, wisdom, and courage, all of which Zelda meets at this point in the narrative as she transforms. It appears that in transforming, Zelda inadvertently triggered the Triforce's power, but what is the Triforce even doing in this scene? Why is it manifesting? Why is it activating? Zelda's Secret Stone, which she just consumed, probably isn't augmenting the Triforce's power. Based on Zelda's abilities, it appears that it is instead augmenting her bloodline powers from the goddess Hylia. Zelda is a descendant of Hylia, and as such, Zelda naturally possesses some holy energy. It is this energy that would be necessary to repair and empower the Master Sword. While the Triforce would be capable of doing this as well, it is made clear in these memories that Zelda cannot sustainably provide the power needed to sustain the Master Sword's regeneration. If she were drawing on the Triforce for power, this probably wouldn't be the case, as the Triforce's power is almost infinite. So the power that the Dragon Tear is augmenting is Zelda's innate power. Once again, if Zelda went into the past, the only explanation for why the Triforce manifests is that the Triforce is supplementing her own innate magic in the process of restoring the Master Sword, which wouldn't be necessary. But if she went into the future, then there's more to it. The Triforce is usually activated when its possessor makes a wish. Zelda may have not made any direct or verbal wish, but her intention is clear. She may be thinking about how she's going to be stuck as the Light Dragon moving forward in time for thousands of years, but that's her sacrifice, that's not her desire in this moment. What she wants is to set up a scenario in which Link can defeat Ganon, and this desire has details to it. Link gets the Puripad from the Light Temple, gains the blessings from the sages, acquires the Master Sword from her Light Dragon form, and then goes to defeat Ganondorf. She has already prepared all of these things to be able to happen. If this in any way counted as a wish, the Triforce, hearing Zelda's wish, would oblige. Zelda doesn't know she's in the future, but the Triforce would. So the Triforce could take Zelda, Ganondorf, the spirits of the sages, and the Light Temple where the Puripad is located, and recall them back in time to the time at which the game takes place. This also works for an explanation of why the Sky Islands float. They're recalled, stuck in their own memory of where they're supposed to be. Any tectonic rising or falling throughout the ages could plausibly result in these recalled regions ending up high above where the rest of the ground used to be. The fact that they weren't previously visible in Breath of the Wild, and the fact that they clearly didn't just erupt out of the ground, was something that didn't sit right with me. And I know that supposedly they could have been above the cloud barrier, but it's bizarre to me to think that these would have been completely unspottable. They should have cast shadows. And I know that this is largely due to the technicalities of game design and the fact that Nintendo doesn't look that far ahead in its storytelling, but that's a lame reason to have for why Sky Islands were previously non-existent. But this theory concisely explains why neither Sky Islands nor the Light Dragon were visible in Breath of the Wild, because they simply weren't there yet. Of course, as Zelda is making this wish, she's also in the process of transforming, and she is losing herself because of that, and so it's plausible that there would be some garbled communication regarding her wish to the Triforce. So it's no wonder that some extra chunks of the future come with, thus creating the other smaller Sky Islands. And given that, it's also no surprise that not everything reaches quite the same destination in time in current-day Hyrule. For instance, Ganondorf and the ruins under the castle appear to end up overshooting, and as a result are discovered before the Sky Islands, which appear at a later date because they weren't recalled quite as far. And when Link and Zelda went to investigate the gloom, of course Zelda would assume that the Zonai murals at the beginning of the game depicted the Imprisoning War, because there already was a distinctly separate Imprisoning War at a different point in the timeline that follows a similar story. Another interesting detail that might support this theory is how we first see the Light Dragon in Tears of the Kingdom. We first see her emerge from this cloud, heading straight upward at a quick pace. And in the memory where Zelda eats the tear and transforms, she flies straight up into a bank of heavy cloud. Now, let's play these back to back so you can see what I mean. Looks oddly fluid, doesn't it? Once again, I do not see a coincidence. When Zelda starts transforming, she's still in the future, but at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom on the Sky Island, we see her emerge from the Cloud Bank in exactly the same way, and I would argue that from the Light Dragon's perspective, it was exactly the same way because she is in the process of going back in time. I don't think that this is an accident either, that for a moment in this story, the sky goes from mostly clear to very cloudy, and then goes back to mostly clear. I think this might be us seeing Zelda going back in time. In the starting area, when you finish those first few shrines, it is very cloudy in that spot, very similar to the cloud bank that Zelda flies up into. We may be inadvertently witnessing the Light Dragon going back in time, arriving in the current day. So there you go, that's the theory, and I'm pretty sure there's nothing that could possibly disprove this brilliant idea. Oh, come on, the Dueling Peaks hasn't been split yet in the Zonai era.